Hello everyone, today's game is between Lee Changho versus Chang Hao. I know many viewers might struggle with these two names, so I made a little script to help you practice the pronunciations. There was a guy named Chang Hao. He is a fan of Chang Ho. And another guy named Chang Hai. He's a fan of Chang Hao. Chang Hao prefers Chang Ho over Chang Hao. Chang Hai prefers Chang Hao over Chang Ho. Chang Hao tells Chang Hai that Chang Ho is better than Chang Hao. Chang Hai thinks Chang Hao is worse than Chang Hai, so Chang Hao should prefer Chang Hao over Chang Ho. In the end, Chang Hao agrees with Chang Hai and becomes a fan of Chang Hao. This game was the second game in the final of the 11th Samsung Cup that was played in 2007. Chang Hao now has a 1-0 lead over Lee Changho in this game. So this is game 2. If Chang Hao wins this game, he is going to be the champion. Chang Hao is playing as black. Lee Changho is playing as white. Black approaches, white plays the one space pincer and black tanukis. White takes the remaining corner. Black approaches, white defends, and they play out the old-time joseki. Now, it's very rare that people play this joseki nowadays because of AI. But back in the days, this is probably the first joseki that most of my viewers have learned. White adds another move in the corner, and black plays the pincer. White decided to not play immediately locally because there's not really an excellent follow-up. Therefore, white approaches the remaining corner. Black plays the two-space low pincer. White double approaches. Black attaches on top. White honeys. Black extends. And they play out a very old school joseki back in the days. White now approaches the remaining corner and black pincers. This is a one space high pincer. Back in the days, you can see that the pincers are very common. But of course, nowadays, because of AI, we know that white has great ways to deal with all kinds of pincers. White attaches. This is also, by the way, this is also a modern variation, even with AI. AI recommends this move. Of course, if white plays the kema here, black is going to push and cut. And because of how many surrounding stones there are for black, this is not a great idea for white to fight here. Black simply have too many helping stones. Alternatively, white can jump on top, and that also is a legit variation. Here, black needs to attach black on top. White needs to attach on top. That's the AI joseki. Another joseki is for white to play the pincer. But of course, this doesn't work for the same reason. You don't want to fight in an area where you're outnumbered. So white attaches, black honeys, and white extends. And as we can see, there's not really any cutting point. If black plays this type of cutting point, white can simply just extend. Even if black is able to hurt the two stones here, his corner is also hurt. And this is not worth it for black. In the actual game, white plays the attach, black blocks, and now because this attach was exchanged, that makes the pressing more severe, and it's harder for black to push and cut. Black blocks on the bottom and then crawls on the third line. Now white plays the cross cut. Black extends on top, that's the shape move, and white extends on the second line. Black extends once again, controlling the fourth line stone, and white extends a few times. Those are all sentes. And white decides to attack black first. Normally for us, our intuition would be played the small knight here, making sure that we have the territory and also the roots, right? Making sure that this group is doing okay, and later looking at the attack. But this game, Lee has been very proactive, and therefore he decided to attack black first. And therefore, in fact, this is a very good point of attacking. It's poking at this weakness and also helping the stone over here. Black ataris, white extends, and black also extends. It's very important for you to play the extension here. Ataring here would be a very big mistake because when white turns, it leaves a miai. There's a push over here and there's a cut on top. So a lot of times it's important when you're in a fight, especially a close body combat like this, to stay calm and not leave weaknesses behind. The mistake that black made is that leaves a cutting point. So even if you got a very comfortable Atari, it doesn't really fix anything. You still have a very serious cutting point. Now, if you come back and fix the cutting point, white is going to push. Now, black needs to rely on several Ataris to get out of the trouble. But when white extends, black Ataris on top, of course, white attaches, and tactically, there's no way for black to get out here. So this would be a bad position for black. And of course, if black jumps out, then white can Atari over here, and these guys are in trouble. So what black played in the actual game is very strong. That is simply extend. White turns and black now connects. White jumps into the center, black kicks. And at this point, I think both players play super well in the early game. But the next move, Lee decided to connect on the 5th line. This is the first move that I didn't quite understand, and it turns out to be a mistake. The correct move is, of course, to extend on top. It's so important in terms of helping this fight, right? When your stone are on the outside, it has influence towards the outside, and you're also putting pressure on black's group. What Lee was worried about was probably that black can get this endgame in sente. Well, this is in fact a little painful for white. White needs to connect to prevent the snapback. But I mean, it's more important to have the momentum in this fight instead of caring about the endgame. And of course, Lee being the best endgame player ever, he's very sensitive to endgames, and therefore, this is probably the reason he connected over here. But the connection is very slow, and it's not a great move because when black Hane's on top, the momentum has changed, right? This move has influence towards the outside. It puts more pressure on white's group over here, and it's also putting a lot of pressure on white here. I'm not sure how white's going to get out. White plays the Hane and black extends. Here, white needs to come back and deal with this group over here. White slides into the corner and black jumps on top. This is another excellent move from Chang Hao. This move not only threatens the stone over here, support the group in the center, and also caps white inside. A very efficient move. So here, white cannot Tanuki locally. If white plays the Tanuki, I'm gonna leave you as a small exercise. Like, what would you play as black over here to punish white's Tanuki? Because this group is having some shape problem, but you need to find the correct move to punish it. Okay, so the correct move for black is to play this bumping shape. So we need to bump into white, and now white's shape is having some serious issues. If white extends into the corner, then we can play the most simple variation, right? These are all forced. And now white has to connect over here. Otherwise, we can Atari and push, and white doesn't have enough ice space. White connects, and now we can see that pretty much we captured white's 4 stones over here. And that's a lot of territory. And of course, that is not acceptable for white. If white pulls the stone back, then we can attach on top. White pushes through, and the correct move here is for black to simply play the bamboo on top, forcing white to connect, and then we take the vital 2-2 point. Locally, there's no way for white to live, and white is just probably dead. I don't see how white's gonna get out through here. It could be game over for white right here. So that shows you the threat is very real, and white cannot Tanuki. Therefore, in the actual game, Lee played the Kosumi in the corner. Not only a very big move in terms of territory, but also a very necessary move to live the corner. The next move, we have Chang Hao playing a very beautiful Tsuji in the center. Alternatively, turning here is also okay, but for a human player, this makes a huge difference. For AI, it doesn't really care. You turn here or you clamp here, it's almost the same win rate. But for humans, this is very strong, right? And especially if you can't push through, then this is going to be a huge problem for white. Now, in the actual game, Lee decided to simply connect, and I feel like in this game, Lee Changho's fighting spirit is just not there. He's just playing a little bit passive, like this connecting over here, which is a big mistake. That's why he's behind in this game. And then he connected in the actual game. What he should have done is just to push out. But of course, as one of the best players back then, he had his worries. Black Ataris, white Atari from outside, black takes, white Ataris, and black simply connects. white now needs to extend to run the group. Here, black has a very beautiful combination, that is to Atari and extend out. At this point, white needs to run the stone, right? It's a similar idea as the extension over here. You don't really want Atari and leave a weakness behind. It's a very important idea. The correct move is for white to simply extend. Currently, there's no ladder, but then black can just play the netting move anyway. If white pushes out, black will extend. White push out once again, black extends. And now white needs to get out. The problem with this is that black turns a few times and then honey on top. White honeys, black cuts. And this is pretty much game over for white because this cutting point is too serious. If you play on the outside, then white only has 2 liberties here, right? So if you play here, then this is only 1 liberty for white now, right? So because of the shape weakness that white has, white cannot choose this variation, and therefore at this point, white pretty much has to give up the 3 stones in the center in order to secure the group over here. But even like that, white needs to play. White should have played like this instead of letting black cap white inside. But of course, for human players, it's very. I understand it's very difficult to appreciate this variation because it just looks so bad for white. In the actual game, Lee was reading that variation and he felt hopeless with that variation and therefore he connects. Black turns and now white jumps in the center. I hope you're enjoying the content so far. If you want to get access to more exclusive content from me, consider checking out my Patreon page. Link is in the description, where I consistently post content backed by professional insights to help you level up your game. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to my channel. I really want to make my channel into the best English Go channel on YouTube, and I cannot do it without your support. Thank you. Let's continue. Next up, we have Chang Hao playing a very beautiful shoulder hit, looking at the block over here and threatening white over here. Very beautiful idea, right? We're trying to pressure one group while aiming at the other group. White crawls, and now black pushes on top. These are very good shape moves for black. AI was suggesting that black simply jumps. This of course looks like a beautiful move because it expands the moyo on the left side and also putting pressure on white. So the push here is a very good shape move and it's very professional. Like it shows that Chang Hao has a very good understanding of shape and he sees a problem with white's shape. And of course, white has a problem with his shape. But this turns out to be a mistake under the eyes of AI because AI is saying that white just needs to answer everything, which Lee Changho did. So at this point, when black throws in, white captures, black squeeze white over here, looks very awkward for Lee because if you connect, it looks so bad, like the shape is so inefficient. And that's why in the actual game, Lee didn't even bother to save the group over here. But that's not correct. The correct idea is to actually just save these stones because there are a lot of territories and also there's some remaining weaknesses such as the cutting point and the cutting point over here. In the actual game, Lee played the clamp on top. But here, Lee just need to play the connection. Black Ataris, white connects. It looks really terrible for white, but the problem is black actually can't do much about this shape. If black plays the Kema, which is the best move, white will also play the Kema to get out. Black pushes and white honeys on top. If black attaches, then white has a wedge. Wedge Atari, which is very nice to Suji. Black Ataris on top, white Ataris, black takes, white takes. So yes, white has a very ugly shape, but because white saved all these stones, he prevented the loss in terms of territory, and also there's a slight weakness that black has over here. There's another slight weakness that later on white can poke. So this would be an equal position moving forward. Like white is actually back into the game because Chang Hao was a little bit perfectionist when it comes to poking at white's shape. But this shows you how hard the game of Go is, right? It looks like locally these are all very sharp moves for black, but then when white actually responds to everything and just play a very ugly shape, turns out the game is just equal. So yeah, that shows you the difference between human and AI is absolutely huge. Okay, So in the actual game, Lee did not bother with saving the group, and therefore Chang Hao claims the profit. And this is 9 stones immediately, 18 points plus all the thickness around it. Absolutely huge move. Why now basically call it a day here and start a fight somewhere else. Black attaches in the corner, white wedges, and this is a pretty common variation in the corner. Black bumps into white, white blocks, and black hanes. And here white just tanuki because there's nothing to do locally. Blocking the territory, white Ataris on top, trying to build the moyo on top. Black connects, and this is a nice move because a lot of the viewers would just capture here, but this move over here actually hurts the moyo a little bit, while this move is just better in terms of points. But it turns out that this move on the outside is a little bit more useful towards breaking the moyo. Black connects, and now white plays the Kema to seal the territory on top. Of course, black cannot let all these become territory. He jumps out, white Ataris, and now black attaches into white and make an invasion, basically. So here we can see our principles of invasion very well illustrated by Chang Hao. White hanes, black extends, and white extends on second line, getting rid of the eye space. Next move, Chang Hao played a beautiful Tsuji. That is a very nice shape move, forming a elephant eye and also a big Kema. Just from the shape of this move, you can tell this is such a beautiful move. If black turns, which is some of my viewers would do, this would be a mistake because you're hoping white would extend and letting you play out this move. And then there's no way to seal black indeed. But here white has a very fierce move that is to double hane on top. And actually black is kind of in trouble. If black Ataris and Ataris, white will extend and block. And now black is all capped inside. And you have to figure out how to live on the bottom. And this is not a fun thing to do as black. But then at this point, black is kind of stuck. If you try to poke at elephant eye, white will simply claim the territory on the bottom. And this is disastrous for black if black loses the group on the bottom. So Chang Hao read that out, and therefore he decided to play this vital move first, which is very brilliant. Here, Lee decided to not deal with this right now, because if you push on top, now Chang Hao is going to turn. Now this hane does not work anymore because black Atari and then Atari. And here we can see that this is not going to work for white. So it's better for Lee to not respond locally. And in the actual game, Lee played the peeping on top and then attaching onto black's group, completely suppressing the group on the left. Black adds another move in the center because after the preparation moves, black is worried about the safety of this group. So he adds another move. And of course, he will suffer some consequences for not responding to white. White was able to pierce through here. Black Ataris, white Ataris on top. Very nice move. Black takes and white Ataris. Black connects and white connects on top. Right? Locally, there's no problem here. So white needs to connect on top. Black naturally plays the 2-space extension, and now white is playing a few exchanges to gain some endgame profits. White now comes back to block this, because if you don't block, black can still push and cut, and you might lose the stones in the center. White blocks, but this is a gote, because the Atari and crawl is not going to cause any serious problems. And therefore, Chang Hao decided to play another move to make sure that this group is fine, because there's still some lingering issues, maybe such as this one, right? It's not easy for black to deal with this. If you push and cut, then white can block you, at least block you here and capture the 3 stones. So still a very important move to play. Black turns, and then his group on top is perfect right now. White now still plays the Kema, getting rid of black's eye space and also gaining some points for himself. Black Ataris and white plays the hane on the first line. Now this is a very nice move by Lee, because if you just respond like this, then later on, Chang Hao was able to get this move, which is huge in terms of points, right? So it's better to play, when black Ataris, it's better to play on the first line, making sure that this is not a sente for black. So in terms of points, white was able to gain more by not connecting over here. And that shows you how strong Lee is when it comes to endgame. Black takes, white connects, and now black attaches. They played a few exchanges, and now black comes back to play the tiger's mouth. Of course, this is a very big sente because black is threatening to disconnect the group, right? This group in the center, you can't really allow black to Atari here. So white needs to fix. Black Ataris, white takes, and black connects. White placed an exchange and then dragged the Panuki back. Black placed the tiger's mouth, and white defends because when black jumps in with this first line stone, there might be some life and death issues in here. So that's a sente. Black Ataris, white takes, and black pushes as a co-threat, take back. White has to go back and connect. And now black plays another move, controlling the stone over here, making sure white cannot extend out and further threaten the black group. The next move, we have Lee playing a Tsuji. That is a very common tactic to against a two-space extension. Black blocks, white pushes up, black honeys, and white cuts. Here, of course, black can also choose just the capture, but then there's one Atari, and then there's another bump into black. So the points that black was able to get might not be as good as what white was able to gain on the outside. That's why in the actual game, when white cuts, Chang Hao decided to take the outside. White honeys and black Ataris on top, white extend, and black plays the Kosumi, white making sure the two stones are captured. Here we can see that by sacrificing the two stones, black was able to gain a very big moyo on the outside. If black is able to seal this line, then later on this could become very big territory. Black now Ataris following up with the idea of enclosing the center. That's a little scary for white. White needs to deal with it right now. And Lee plays the Atari, black extend, and here Lee plays a beautiful Tsuji. It's probably the best Tsuji in this game for white. And this shows you why Lee is such a strong endgame player. A lot of our viewers would just connect here, right? When black block, preventing the center from being destroyed. When you Atari, that's a little too late because black can Atari from behind. When you capture two stones, black will simply connect over here. So all what you gained were two stones over here. So the idea for white to play the Tsuji is to make this group heavier. Now let's look at all the responses that black can have. So first of all, if black plays the Atari on top, then white will simply connect. If black now comes back and block, then white, instead of capturing the two stones, white can extend out. Black Ataris and white can keep extending. And here black might actually be in trouble because if you keep playing like this, then then white can get out like this, and then you might have some issues over here with your group. So that becomes complicated, and that would give Lee a lot of chances. Now, what about black cuts over here? Well, this simply doesn't work because white can Atari and you can't really connect. And of course, if black Ataris over here, which is the actual game, white extends, black block on top. And now, as we can see, before we only captured two stones, but now white has the chance to cut over here and also capture these four stones. And the point difference is absolutely huge. And this just shows you how good Lee was at endgame. He was indeed, and he probably still is, the best endgame player ever. So beautiful move. So in the actual game, Chang Hao has to block over here, white extends, and this is what they played. Instead of capturing right now, white decides to take some endgame on the outside. They're all very big endgames. White crawls. Black now has to go back in Atari. And of course, if you just cut over here, then black plays a move. This is a lot of territory in the center. So white decided to break the territory, and black connects the stones back. Very big move. And white plays another move, making sure no big territory is going to be formed here. So black gave up the center, by connecting the stones over here. Of course, this move is bigger than the center. You might be thinking, well, how is this bigger than the center? Well, the reason is, even if white played the two moves consecutively in the center, there's still a lot of hidden points that black has because he has a very thick wall. Like, there's some hidden points over here. Later on, it's easier for black to form points than white, obviously, right? When black plays another move over here, for example, of course, this would be a bad move right now. You see extra territory. So that's a good lesson, I guess, for people who are watching, is that whenever you're getting invaded, your big moyo is getting invaded, it's very difficult for your opponent to completely make your points vanish. That's why Chang Hao understood that correctly, and he played big endgames on the outside. Okay. Next up, we have Chang Hao squeezing over here, forcing Lee to respond, and black turns, white blocks on the first line, and after a few exchanges, black decides to threaten the connection that white has. White has to respond to that. Black extends, and white plays the tiger's mouth, making sure the group is very safe in the center. And after this, black comes back and takes away the biggest endgame on the board. That is that is to block over here. Because if you don't block, there's a monkey jump, and that's a lot of points. So at this point, this is a winning game for black, for Chang Hao, because black is leading on the board by 10 points. So after Komi, it's probably like, it's a 4 points or 3 points lead. And for professional players such as Chang Hao, it's not possible to lose this game. Even if Lee is the best endgame player, this endgame is not like super complicated, so it's not easy for Lee to come back. And indeed, Lee did not come back. The game went all the way to the end, and Chang Hao won this game eventually by 3.5 points. So to conclude, this game was very high quality, and the reason Lee fell behind and was not able to come back into the game, the first mistakes when black kicks over here, white decided to keep the points instead of fighting for the momentum. So that was a very big place for mistake from Lee. And of course, after a few correct moves from both players, white had to lift the corner, right? So at this point, when black clamps in the center, another chance is for Lee to push out and do a counterattack anyway, even if it's pretty hard locally. But Lee played very passive, and therefore he's completely falling behind. So when black turns over here, you can see that black is just super strong. And also, there's like a lot of momentum building on the left side, while white still has to run. So this is why Lee was in a very inferior position throughout the mid-game all the way to endgame. But when you look at Chang Hao, he has played quite well in this game. I can say pretty much there's no major mistakes, or there could be an inaccuracy at this point when black plays the push here. Chang Hao was too, I guess he was pursuing perfection when it comes to shape. And in fact, locally, this is a great move for shape. But of course, under the eyes of AI, like humans just make mistakes. And this is, I mean, you can't really blame Chang Hao for playing this move. But Lee didn't answer this correctly either. So the game was still like very favorable for Chang Hao. So at this point, instead of white connecting and bring the game back to equal, white decided to play super generous and just give up the group, letting black capture the group in the center. Not only is a lot of points, but also a lot of thickness for black. And later on, we saw that how many moves white had to spend to break the moyo.
She sells seashells by the seashore. The shells she sells are surely seashells. But if she sells shells on the seashore, I'm sure she sells seashore shells.